Hello, friends and listeners. Welcome to Truth, Lies, and Alibis, the true crime podcast from three friends sharing their perspectives from having years of 911 dispatching experience. Episode 1. Is anyone there? When 911 fails. Today, Brittany, Kylee, and I are discussing the 2015 home invasion of the Lasley sisters in Salt Lake City, Utah. We'll take a deep dive into the emergency dispatch side of things and examine what might cause a 911 center to fail its community. I just want to ask you guys, when you were dispatching, what was your worst fear?
My worst fear? I have two. My worst fear is taking 911 for a family member. Mm. And then the next one was working another 998 like Tyler's. I didn't want to do that again.
Yeah, I did, I guess, because when my family lives here, I never really thought about that.
I took a 911 call from my grandpa once.
I did it for my dad.
He witnessed a car accident, though, so it wasn't that bad. But I knew it was him, and he didn't know it was me. And so I had to be professional, And then I texted him, and I said, "Nice 911 call, Grandpa. Thank you for calling in."
Mine was when my dad, they still have no idea what happened, but he had this really bad low blood pressure. He woke up in the middle of the night and had this episode. And I was like, oh, that's my parents. And then I picked up and I was listening, and he was getting more and more short with her and like being pretty aggressive and rude to her. So I ended up taking over because I was trying to be professional at the same time, but it was like
you had to.
And then you could just hear my dad in the background, and he couldn't, it was like, whoa, whoa, and you couldn't understand anything that he was saying. And the medics got there and they took his blood pressure or whatever, and they were like, you should be dead. Like, your blood pressure is so low that it's like not.
That's terrifying.
Really scary.
Yeah.
That's like one of my worst fears was taking it where somebody needed CPR or it was that moment.
Yeah.
So
all of mine are radio related. I feel like I do well enough compartmentalizing to be able to handle the phone calls. And I don't have children, and there's not a lot of little kids in my family. Those aren't the type of calls that get me, but the type of calls that got to me is like somebody's mom, because I'm so close with my mom. But I can compartmentalize pretty good with phone calls. It was the radio stuff, and the 998 was one of the scariest things I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And we all came out okay on that. Like, that's the tough thing when they don't.
So I picked this story because it kind of has a 911 element to it, and it kind of has like one of my worst fears, which is answering a phone call and then not putting it in and something really bad happening. It reminded me when I worked at DPS, I took a call for a lady who was obviously being beaten by whoever she was with, husband, boyfriend, screaming. I got a good location on her, but we didn't have a description on anything, and it was a rest stop, and we never found her, and I kept calling back, and finally her phone was turned off. It always scares me that you could think that you're like, oh, I'm not going to put a call in, and something could happen. I mean, at the PD, it's different because we had to put it in, right?
Yeah.
At DPS, it wasn't always like that. Sometimes you don't have a location. Sometimes you do. I picked today's story because it includes a 911 call, which is kind of questionable, and then it also has home invasion. It also includes two sisters who fought back against a man who decided to break into their home on September 23rd, 2015. So the two sisters are Breann and Kayli Lasley. They had just moved into their home in Salt Lake City, Utah. It was like a week after they moved in. And Breann was sitting in her room on her computer when she heard a whisper from her window saying, "Hey girl, I'm coming in." Yeah, that's what I said.
I don't already.
So
already
I
got
got put
chills.
on to lock your doors, lock your windows.
Dowels.
Yes,
Dowels.
like you
in your
said.
window.
So Breann thought instantly the man was there to rape her, which I could understand. He told her to cooperate or he would go downstairs to get her sister. And Breann said, "I'm not going to cooperate. You're not going to get what you want out of this situation." That made him mad. He had broken in. He grabbed Breann and whispered, "I'm going to kill you." And he covered her mouth and began punching her in the stomach. Breann attempted to fight off the intruder while her sister was asleep downstairs, and she was hoping to keep him from getting to her. So she was trying not to fight him off without involving her. Yeah. But Kaylee heard her screaming, and she ran upstairs to help her sister. When she ran up the stairs, Breann was kicking the subject in the groin. She said something like, "I was kicking him where you're always told to kick boys." And I was like, yes, you go. But apparently that just made him mad. And when her sister was running up the stairs, he lifted his leg above Breann and he kicked her down the stairs. And she flew down the stairs into the wall. And there was even a hole where her head hit. Wow. Yeah, which is terrifying. According to the girls, the subject kept saying, "Give me your car keys, give me your car keys, I'm not going to rape you." And at some point, I tried to find more information on it, but I couldn't find exactly. The sisters decided to try to call 911, and I heard that they used their Apple or Watch or Siri or something and said, "Hey Siri, call 911." And it took a couple tries and it finally called, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Okay.
Eventually, somehow, they called 911, and that made him even angrier.
Okay.
So he pulled out a knife and started stabbing Breann in the stomach, leg, and then tried to stab her like in the heart. Breann said he was stabbing her to kill her. He told the sisters, "I'm going to kill you." And Kaylee replied with, "No, I'm going to effing kill you." And so also in one of the interviews, Breann was like, "It shocked me because I never heard her cuss before." And can you imagine? She's like, "No, I'm gonna kill you."
Yeah.
Like, she was like, "I'm not taking your shit." Breann eventually, like, she noticed we're not gonna beat him. Like, you need to go get help. So she told her sister to go get help. And even though she didn't want to leave her behind, she ran outside and yelled for help. She was like screaming, "He's stabbing my sister, like he's killing her." And eventually the neighbors called 911 to get help, saying they could hear their neighbors screaming like loudly, and it was multiple neighbors. In the 911 call, one of the 911 calls that Kayli Lasley made, you can hear her asking the subject what he wanted. Like, you can obviously tell that she's in distress. She's like, "What do you want? What do you want? Like, what are you doing?"
So did they have an open line with her while the neighbors were calling in?
So apparently not. Like, they hung up on her, I think, eventually, but they didn't.
The call went through to the 911 center,
Yes,
though?
because there's multiple recordings, and in the one you could hear her like asking him what he wanted, and there's a couple where you can clearly hear them yelling the address that they're at, because you say 911, where's your emergency?
Yeah.
And you can clearly hear her yell it. In the calls that you listen to, there are some muffled things because they're fighting for their life, but you can hear that they're obviously in distress. They obviously need help. In an interview with Inside Edition, Breann said, "We just figured we could trust them. 911 is going to come." I mean, yeah, when you call.
They're supposed to do.
Yep. An officer who was in the area for another attempted break-in call related to the same subject who broke into the sister's house heard her yelling, and he ran into the house and he shot and killed the intruder. The officer was Officer Hone of Salt Lake City Police. And after they figured out who the subject was who attacked the sisters, his name was Robert Berger. He had a long criminal history that began in 1986. He had just been released 8 days ago from prison and had an active warrant at the time of the attack because he was sent to like a halfway house, kind of. And he went to a medical appointment, and he never returned back to like check in.
So he was like furloughed or something.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
so he like AWOL'd.
Yes. And like I said, it was just 8 days prior to the attack that he had like gotten out of prison.
What was he in prison for?
So I kind of looked into it. Like I said, he had like a long history. In 1994, he was convicted of aggravated assault and burglary. In 2000, he escaped police custody while at a doctor's office. So apparently that's like a thing.
Yeah.
For 4 hours, he was on the run and carjacked a vehicle and kidnapped a woman. He told the woman he wasn't going to hurt her, but he wanted to get out of there. Police eventually caught up with him. He pled guilty to aggravated robbery and attempted theft in 2002, and in his plea agreement, the charges of aggravated kidnapping and escaping custody were dropped. He was sentenced to 5 years to life for the aggravated robbery conviction. He ended up serving about 14 years in prison and was released in June of 2014 on parole. He violated his parole multiple times and returned to prison, and then eventually when he got out, he went to that halfway house.
Okay.
So I guess a life of crime was literally just what he did.
Yeah.
On the night of the break-in, remember I said the officer was in the area for a different call?
Yeah.
He had attempted to break into the window of a 2-year-old girl's bedroom at an apartment in the neighborhood just before he broke into the girl's home. And the girl's father chased him away with a hammer. And that's why the officer was in the area, because he was responding to that call. According to the 911 center, there was no help sent because the center must ask so many questions before they can put a call into their system. The call center is blaming the call system that they were using at the time, which is Priority Dispatch. And
Interesting.
yeah, that's what I said. And Breann Lasley is like, she was suing them. I didn't see. I'm guessing she probably won something.
I would imagine.
But I didn't see anything. And when they responded to her suing them and the center saying that the reason they never sent any help by basically saying that they always say when in doubt send them out, which I mean should be a policy for everybody, and I think it is, but what do I know?
Well, that's the tough thing, right? Is there's thousands of emergency dispatching centers across the country, but there is no national guidelines.
And there should be.
And there absolutely
which has been
should
like
be.
a huge fight through like any training. So like the what is it, the Denise Amber Lee case, which is why we have like phase 1, phase 2, and tracking. Like it and in any like in a lot of these cases with 911, like there's so it's been this whole thing where like nationwide guidelines for 911 to have and be held accountable to, because like it's mind-boggling that you would work at a center where it's optional to put in a call when you hear stuff like that. So you hear somebody screaming in the background, their address, you hear them, it's almost like that when you're told like they call and they order a pizza, they're in a situation. So why would you not put in a call for service?
And what's interesting, a side note on that too, is I've seen a lot of posts online that say that that's what you're supposed to do,
which is
that's not something that's taught.
Nope. And it's not something like, because I've seen Facebook, I probably would ask questions, but not everybody has a Facebook.
And like that always gives me chills, because you see it like back when Tumblr was really big. It was all over Tumblr and it's all over Twitter, and it's these sites that younger kids and the younger generations are getting on, and they're told if you're in a situation in which you can't directly ask for help, this is what you have to do. And if they end up getting a dispatcher who's been on the job for 20 years and they think it's another prank call,
I was gonna say that
they're immediately that the help that they need and what they've been told they're supposed to do is being ripped from them.
I don't know, maybe it should be something that you should ask more questions, but also maybe don't spread that around when it's not.
There's just no education around it. Like before I was a 911 dispatcher, I had no idea that there were no national standards for something so crucial.
Yeah.
You are literally answering the phone to people having their worst day, and you're responsible for what kind of response that gets. And it's different for every place that receives the 911 call.
Even, like I said, in the same, like, DPS that I worked at was in the same county. And it's still different. So that pizza thing, going back to that, I think about that because when I worked at AMR, I don't know if you know, but literally it's one number difference for AMR than it was to a pizza place. And they would literally call. And they would literally be like, I need to order pizza. And I'd be like, bro, you have the wrong number. And now I'm like, did they really need to order a pizza, or did they need to order a pizza? Like, so it's hard, which is kind of why I picked this story, because I thought it's important. It's crazy.
The same thing, just a side note, like the domestic violence signal that they're doing
on TikTok.
People
I asked,
even know what that is.
So I asked Ryan, it's DV in sign language. Or no,
it's like you close your fingers over your fist. If they do that,
then actual sign language for it.
Maybe
because that would make sense.
Like, that's why I thought it. But
it's like a universal signal for help or something like that. So they're putting it out there. Like if you look at Gabby Petito, she did it in one of the videos when they met with the officers. So it's this. They're supposed.
But then I also kind of wonder, did she see that, or is that where it started? Because I didn't see any videos.
Before that,
okay, I didn't.
Yeah, it was this. It's a sign, and they're putting out there that like any registered nurse, any like if you
or a police officer,
that these people will know what you're talking about. I had never heard of that.
Yeah,
and there was no, and like with COVID and everything, like we haven't been to any training. So if it's in some training in Utah. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it is, but if it was, we wouldn't know. So there is no universal training throughout the nation as to what a 911 dispatcher or emergency service should or should not know or do.
And when I saw that, I literally asked Ryan, because I was like, hey, do you know what this means? And he was like, am I supposed to? And I'm like, according to TikTok, you're supposed to know. So I told him, because I was like, you know, you should know if this is like a trend that's going around. Some, like you said, some
Impressionable.
teenager might
Yeah.
think that
Yes.
everyone knows that.
Yes.
And Ryan's an old man and doesn't have TikTok. So of course he's not going to freaking know. And like Kylie said, there's no training.
There's nothing about it. Half the stuff I learned on how to do this job and do it well was not done through a training that I went to.
Yeah.
It was done by doing ride-alongs, being out in the community, talking to people, and
Learning by
knowing
doing.
and having TikTok.
Yeah,
you know what I
and
mean? Like
it's
having
it's
a social
that
media
online
website.
right. It's the online presence of like what, you know, not even kids, right? Like what the communities, what these people in our surrounding areas are learning from these widespread, I'll call it a myth. It's a myth.
It is a myth. And what they're expecting you to know.
Yes, because they're told, if this is what's happening, order a pizza.
Yeah, and that's
because they will know. And it's
I mean, there was that one story where that guy did know what to do, and that's great. But like you said, if they've been on the job for 25,
common sense. But if you were to call 911 at our dispatch center right now, there are people in that room that are so brand new to this and so young, they don't have the life experience that I don't think they would catch on to that. They would make it
or people who've been there a long time.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest risk.
Yeah, because the younger people might have TikTok.
That's true.
Yeah.
But
they're more aware of it, but it's the ones that have been there for long enough that they're like, another one of these, you know?
Yeah. Because they're aggravated and
well, I just think it leads into the fact that there is no policies and procedures for what dispatchers are supposed to do, for 911 call takers, what they're supposed to do, what their response
which
is.
maybe is something that should be changed.
Absolutely 100%, because it also makes me think about, obviously, before shifting all the blame, we don't know what that center looks like. We don't know like how many call takers they had. We don't know. So my thing is like looking at we knew they called in. We knew the girl was outside yelling and neighbors were calling in, and we knew there was a nearby call.
Yes.
So in our center, the center we used to work into, we would all immediately be on the same page, because there's 6 of us, 7 of us in a room that are taking the calls, putting them in, dispatching the officers. But in places like Phoenix, in which
where there's like 20,
you've got 20
plus,
call takers,
like,
plus an additional 15 dispatchers who could be in different rooms. We don't know what the call center looks like. So from our point of view, in which we're like, well, that's immediately, because of the factors, that this is a huge emergency and something's obviously happening. No excuse for not doing something. Absolutely.
Well,
not.
And then
anything like that,
they
that
never put a call into the system.
Yeah. That's
so
like
you're saying, when we put a call into, if it's in the same general area, for us at least, our CAD system would say, hey, we have a call here. But even if that was the case, they never put a call in. So
and that seems like a very weak excuse, is the fact that we have to ask a certain amount of questions. Like, excuse me, but bullshit. People in emergencies probably can't answer all of your questions.
You're never going to get all your questions answered.
You never, and that's the thing. Like, if that person is super freaking calm and they're nonchalant about something's weird about the call. But in any emergency call you take, they like that. There's not one person that's ever, when they're truly in an emergency situation, they're just like, that's why they yell at you, just get here.
Yes.
They don't care.
Well,
they don't care about giving you their name, their phone number. They just want you to get there.
They want help.
Their life is in danger.
Even if your life isn't in danger. I was a 911 dispatcher and I got in a car accident with my kids and I freaked out and was the worst 911 caller ever. I 100% admit it.
Shame on you.
But like, when you're in that situation, you might be like, oh, I know what to do. No, my kids were hurt. I was terrified. I just think it's a lot to think about.
Yeah, I think it's important. Because, again, we don't work at that center. We don't know what it's like, but that's, in my mind, completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter it doesn't matter
like
if it's just an open line and they don't answer you at all.
Or even if you can hear that they're messing around, you still need to put a call in. Like,
especially if you have a location.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to hear some of that.
Yeah, I do too.
They responded by saying, when in doubt, send them out, and that their call system was never opened or used when the 2 sisters called 911. So like I said,
their call system, meaning a call wasn't created? What do they mean by that?
They said that the call system was just never used. I don't know exactly what they meant by it. I'm guessing they meant a call was never put in. I'm sure they had their call system open, but they probably just didn't enter the information that they were receiving.
I mean, yeah, if you hit abandon or whatever their button is and you've never put it in, it's gone.
Yeah, so they wouldn't even know, right? So the sisters still struggle with the attack today. Although Breann and Kayli healed from their physical wounds, in an interview with Crime Watch Daily, Kayli said she didn't know if she would ever be able to get his voice out of her head. Since the attack, the girls have done multiple interviews. Like I said, I watched a few of them, and some of the details of the story are different with each news story. Like one of them said that the officer was off duty and he came, but multiple of them said he was responding to that call. So I'm assuming that, that's probably why he was in the area. In doing some research, I found that Bree had started a website called the BIA movement. I looked around the site a little bit. It appears the site is dedicated to inspiring women to fight back when attacked. A statement on the homepage says, "We are creating a movement of mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical acts of strength that create a holistic picture of self-defense while addressing the results and roots of abuse along the way." According to the website, only 20% of girls fight back in a situation like this, and Bree stated, "Every single minute since that 6 minutes of physically fighting a man who was trying to kill me has been just as crucial to my continued survival." So some of the 911 calls were like kind of hard to hear, like I said. I'm going to pull up. So on her Twitter, she has part of the 911 call, and I'm going to play it, a little bit of it, so you guys can hear.
911, what is the address of the emergency? What do you want? Hello? What do you want? Hello? Hey, 50,000 man street. Stop us! Stop us, please!
In that part, you can hear her saying, help us, what do you want? But she says the address. Like, you can hear the address, and they didn't put anything in. And she was just like, hello.
Yeah, that's
hello.
unacceptable.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something that, as the longer that I worked in the dispatch center, the more frustrated I got when people were sitting there, because I think they think that if you say hello multiple times, it like almost insinuates that you're trying to do something. But I think it's more important, like you can say 911, where's your emergency? 911, hello, like a couple times, and then just being silent to listen to what's happening, because that's so crucial, especially in that situation. Like, you already know, so you can hear the scuffling, you know that there's a physical altercation going on, or somebody's trying to get away from something, or something's going on. You can hear her saying, what do you want? You can't tell me as a 911 operator you haven't heard that multiple times in a domestic violence situation.
Absolutely.
Or a situation that,
well, and she
somebody's
clearly
trying to get away.
says, help us.
Yeah, and then
So
she starts
even if
saying,
you're
"Help
not taking
us."
all that into account.
So, and then any 911 center, so it's 2015, so any 911 center probably has phase 2. So, I mean, I get it. There's that, like, what do they call it? That complacency, that empathy fatigue or compassion fatigue, which you see a lot in emergency responders. Like, they lose that sense of, like, any situation. Like, yeah, you reach situations where, like, they're just screwing around, right? But 10, like, that one time out of 10 times, it's gonna be a real thing.
Yeah.
So, like, no matter what you're doing, you should be treating every call like it is a life or death, and you should be sending somebody out. So, and like in this situation, so you're receiving multiple 911 calls after, like, so maybe the first one, like, yeah, I guess you don't put it in, even though if that was my first 911 call would be going in.
100%.
I would take the write-up if my
100%.
center was not working like that.
Yeah.
And then, so then you get another one. Okay, clearly something's going on. They're calling again. That's when a call should be put in. Like, the first time, definitely, but like if you get that second one, yeah, there's no if and or but. And now there are so many other resources out there. Like in our centers, you have phase 2, but then we had
Rapid
SOS, and then there was the other part of Rapid SOS. What was it? Deploy something.
Rapid deploy.
Right? That gave you, like, if they had information out there that was on there, and you could, and then you could initiate a text message conversation before text to 911 came to our center. So you can't tell me that our center was the only center out there that has access to these things. There's more out there.
And this was in Salt Lake, right?
Yeah, and they made a total of 4 911 calls.
See, and touching back on what you said that I think is really crucial, right? The, like, hello, 911, hello, can you hear me? And then listening. And then the second she starts talking, help us, that she's talking back to that dispatcher needs to let that girl know that she's there.
Yeah.
Hey, I hear you. Can you tell me where you're at? Like,
Give
Instead
me
of
your
saying,
address.
hello,
Yes.
hello.
Because that's not doing anything. She's obviously she's busy.
Well, and if they gave the address, put the address in, have someone go check. Also, they had the address. If they had put it in there, they could have said, caller called again and stated this, but they obviously didn't put anything in the system.
Yeah.
So
and
how
staying on the phone, like you said, staying on the phone
Yeah,
as
don't
long
hang
as you
up.
can. Even if she can't answer you,
Or
even if
just
she
listening.
can't hear you, just to listen. Because even if it's an open line, you get an idea if there's physical altercations going on. Is she still talking? Or has she been knocked unconscious? Is there a gunshot? There's so many other things that she can't communicate that you can still learn just by listening.
Which is
Right.
what made me cringe, is like,
Yes.
they literally did nothing.
Yeah, that's
with it.
unacceptable.
So yeah, no, like you should be.
I apologize to those girls because that never should have happened.
Yeah.
But I mean, they survived.
From
and
any.
they're pretty badass.
They're super
I have to
badass.
give them
They're-
some credit because
yes, but
it never
nobody
should have happened.
deserves that.
No.
No, and that 911 operator, like if that was me, if I did that, I would be embarrassed. Like sitting there and
Ah, it
saying
would be-
hello.
That's why I was like, this is my worst nightmare.
That's one of the worst. Like I in the end, like it was. I hated going hello. It sounds so. You sound so dumb. I'm sorry, but when there really is like a true situation for like it to sit there and listen and to be competent in your job is, you can own that, but to sit there and say hello, you are covering crucial information that could be coming through and you're going to miss it. And then you don't, and like we all tell our trainees, it's seconds, right? You better be listening and your listening ear better be on. You don't have time to listen back. So using your IR, yes, it's a good tool to listen back to stuff, but when the stuff's going down, you don't have time to use that. So
Right.
you need to be on your A game.
Literally, those seconds are life and death for some
Yeah.
of these people.
Clearly, because I mean, whether they fought back or not, there's so many other stories out there where they do fight back and they don't live, right? Like they are overpowered. So for
And
that
he
girl,
was not. He was there to kill them.
yeah, like you're right. These girls are badass, and they made the right moves for them in those moments, and they decided like, no, I'm not going to rely on this. I got to rely on myself. And they recognize that, which is awesome for them. But coming from like the dispatcher side of it, yeah, that's like, and to hear all of that and not even put in an effort, put in a call for service, that's embarrassing for the
Which
entire
is what,
community.
when I listened to this story, I was like, what the heck? Like, literally, the whole thing made me cringe. The whole thing, it's just sad. She literally says, we figured they would come.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and you should expect that. You should, because they should.
Yeah.
Because you've dialed the number, you've asked for help. Even if you didn't, it's obvious that there's something that is not right that's happening.
Well, see, like stories like this, I'm like, I don't understand.
Well, it's relevant. I just pulled it up too, but it's that it was recent in 2019, I forget where, but you had the 911 dispatcher who was on the phone with a victim stuck in a flood. And the lady wanted to pray. And that dispatcher had zero, like while they stayed on the line and they had people going, she had zero compassion towards her. And essentially at one point told that lady to shut up while they were on 911, and that lady drowned, and that was the last communication. So like I know
I think we're stressing Jessica out.
No, it breaks my heart, because as somebody that used to be a part of that community, I am ashamed to the bottom of my soul. I am ashamed that people in my community, quote unquote, my 911 community, would do that.
Yeah.
Like you said, like this woman ended up dying, and her last conversation with a woman with, excuse me, who couldn't give a shit. Unacceptable.
Well, it's just heartbreaking. So it's
job.
like when you, and it brings to light that lack of attention that dispatchers truly get. Like, so we're giving attention to mental health and all of that stuff to police officers, to medics, to firefighters, but where is that for a dispatcher? Yes. They're facing the same trauma as they are. Yeah, maybe they're not seeing it, but I had a lady die on the phone with me. You can't tell me that didn't break my heart, and I didn't need to go see a counselor about that.
Or that kid who I did CPR with for an hour.
Yeah.
Like, it's unacceptable, but it's like you're saying, the dispatchers don't get help for their mental health, and then eventually that
They
leads to the
fall
burnout.
into that compassion fatigue, and they come into that point of, I literally don't care anymore. Because like, what somebody told me this recently, so police officer sees more in a day, I don't remember the percentages, but more in a day than an average human will see in their lifetime. So if a police officer sees it, what does a dispatcher hear?
Yes.
So your average day is going in and hearing people's worst nightmare every day. And then that's the thing too. Like, you have your true emergencies, and then you have the people who are in a car accident, and that is like the worst day for them.
Mhm.
And they're in hysterics, or they're very upset, or you have somebody dealing with a civil matter, like easements. Easements are classic civil matter that people deal with all the time. Neighbors get pissed at each other. So it's that constant battle, and they're mad at you now because you can't really help them. They have to go through the courts, but they want some immediate gratification. So you're dealing with all of these issues throughout your community every single day. And then to top it off, you're short staffed, you're working long hours, because every center I know works 412s or whatever. They're not working 8-hour shifts. They don't get regular days off. They're working the
You
holidays.
don't get a lunch
They
break.
don't get a lunch.
They don't
Yeah.
get, people don't get to leave the center. Like, we never got to leave the center. That was a rarity. So it's like these working conditions, like, people don't really truly understand the working conditions of a dispatcher. Like, an officer gets to go drive their car to lunch. We have to order it. You
Yeah.
don't get to walk out.
And we're lucky if we can do that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're lucky if you get, like, people think you get breaks during the day. I'm sorry, I've got a whole 12-hour shift where I didn't get to pee.
Yeah.
So like and it's because it's busy and you're required to be answering that radio. So like, yeah, there are some major things that people need to look at for a communication center, emergency communication center. Not giving an excuse to anybody, but this is the result of compassion fatigue. This is the result of people just not giving a shit anymore, because
They
don't know how to
Yeah.
they can't separate themselves from it anymore. There's no, you know what I mean? They don't get to be a person outside of that.
Yeah.
And like
Well,
Jessica said, there's no national training.
Yeah,
Right.
and I'll touch on the mental health issue of it too. Is that one of the 998s I worked, the dispatcher who was handling the radio traffic said, put it as clear as I can put it to anybody who's never been in that situation and doesn't know 911, is when you watch a scary movie, the monster or bad guy or something is at its scariest when you don't see it. As soon as that fear and that fright takes shape, your head can wrap around it, and it might be scary, but it's less scary because you can see it and you're not imagining what your own personal worst nightmare would be. As a 911 dispatcher, you're only getting to imagine it. So you're imagining your worst fear out there, and you don't get to have that toned back at all. So radio traffic and the 911 calls are those scary movies where you never see the bad guy.
And you never know the outcome.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the time. Yeah. So, and then for those of you that don't know what a 998 is, it's an officer involved shooting, or an officer that they're involved in a shooting. A 999, if we ever say that, would be an officer who needs immediate backup. So codes.
This is kind of why I picked this one, because I listened to a lot of podcasts. I've never heard a podcast where there was like dispatchers who were talking about true crime, and a lot of times they don't, like, the other podcasts like don't understand the dispatcher side. But I, like, even as a dispatcher, this whole story was
it's heartbreaking.
And mind-blowing, and I couldn't understand.
There was one call, I don't remember where it took place. There was no sort of neglect done that I can remember from what I heard, but there was a kid 16 or older, because he drove himself to this park, and he was leaving or preparing to sleep in his van or something like that, and the automatic seat caught him, and he was being crushed. And he had his phone, and he called 911, and he called for help. And they were on the phone with him, and they sent officers out, and I guess they couldn't find him because he was just saying where he was, and obviously he's at a park, so there's no house number. Officers went through the area, didn't find him. He calls back again, still actively being crushed alive, and stayed on the phone with the 911 dispatcher through that ordeal, and the officers were too late. This young kid died on the phone being crushed alive with someone he didn't know. And that person will never be able to forget that.
No. When I had that lady, it was like my first year of being a dispatcher, and it was this lady went down within seconds. Like, it was not, she was having a stroke, and it was with like less than a minute from the initial 911 call to being fine to silence and
Oof.
hearing her. She passed away on the phone with me, and as that happened, you could hear the medics knocking on the door, and it was like you don't shake that. Like, you are the last, that I was the last person that lady ever talked to.
Mm-hmm.
I was the last person that said, I've got help coming to you.
Right.
It's like,
It's hard.
and after that, I never said it's going to be okay again, because
that's huge.
It, like, you don't know. And it was, but I was brand new. I had no idea what, what to say in this situation like that. And nobody in the room cared about me and what I was going through. They just thought it was another medical. And then I was working the county radios. So like, the sergeant that was working that day could hear it in my voice that this is not good. This is why she's asking for us to go. And then after that, my entire career, I would send people to medicals all the time. They'd be like, why'd you send us that? Well, because it sounded like it was going to be horrible. And I would rather you be there and it be nothing than you not go and it be something. You're literally down the road. So it's like, but you don't ever forget like that whole entire conversation. Like, I still think I have the chronology from the call in a folder, like I think we pulled the call, but it's not. And in that moment, it shows you too, like, that's why you're there. And sometimes that you're the person that they needed in that moment. And for people, like, if you, like, for somebody to call you on the phone who's in a scary situation, like going to drown, and say, please pray with me, and you tell them to be quiet, like, how dare you?
Yes.
That is such a, there's no words for it. That is such an, like, not embarrassing, but it is like,
it's unexcusable.
It is unexcusable. It's the moment that you don't want to be a part of that community because of a person like that.
Yeah.
You don't want to be associated with it because you didn't, that's not how I would have operated. I would have prayed with her on the phone in a heartbeat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything I can do to make you feel better so that you know that I'm here.
Yes.
That someone cares and is there for you. Yeah.
So it's just, and it's like, and that's so crucial too, like, that it just brings to evident, like, or brings to light, not to evident, that, like, that it's something I noticed through my career too. Compassion fatigue is real. And there needs to be, like, people need to freaking pay attention. So when somebody walks in your office and says, I am not okay, I don't care anymore, those words are taken like, well, crap, we should get you some help. We need to take you out of this environment and stick you somewhere else for a little bit.
Yeah, mental health is huge.
Well, and I'll admit, like, even on my time there, like, I definitely, like, burnout's real. And universe knows we all had it.
Well, I read somewhere that, like, the typical dispatcher, it's like a 2-year thing. Like, that's as long as anyone can hand.
2 to 3, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like 7 years, 8 years, something like that. How long were you?
8.
10.
Kylie.
Yeah.
You like had 5 lifetimes and just
that's why I say when it's funny, people laugh at me, but I say anybody who works in emergency response, whether it be a police officer, a medic, a firefighter, they shouldn't be working 25 plus years. Every year should count as like 3 years if you're doing a 25-year plan, because there's no, like 20 years. When I was talking to my dad just retired too from office, being a police officer. When I was talking to him, he did 32 years, and he said at my 20-year mark, I was ready to be done. But again, they see more in one day than like you can't tell me a single person. That is pretty traumatic life if you go to car accidents, suicides, natural deaths, in one day.
And that's only considering our own community. You think about officers that live in Detroit, the homicide capital, like Chicago, and places like that, where where violent crimes.
And the dispatchers behind that.
Yeah.
Well, and it blows my mind. This is the thing that blows my mind too, is that for police officers and dispatchers, and probably like medical staff too, there's no requirement for them to go to a counselor or go to a psychologist. You should be, if you're working
Are you over
in
there?
that,
Preach.
It's insane.
if you're working in that environment, it should be required monthly, once a month, to at the very bare minimum, to go and talk to a counselor. Period. It shouldn't even be, if you care about your physical health, why don't you care about your mental health? Sorry.
Yeah. No, this is why I brought this. I was like, you know what?
Well,
We would probably offer like a unique perspective to this story.
Yeah.
Like,
and I'll bring it back to what I was saying earlier, is the fact that like burnout's real. We've all been there. But I will say I can proudly stand behind the fact that regardless of how disgruntled I was any day, whatever my other phone calls would be like, as soon as I took that call, that you can tell is, I won't say real, because all calls are real. You get the kids screwing around every once in a while, but that's very rare. But you get that call that sounds like that, or you get that call where you can, where things are different. That's where being an 911 dispatcher is very difficult, because it takes a certain sort of intuition and gut. And regardless of my worst day working, you take that call, you always change to it. It doesn't matter how bad my day was. This person needs me to be somebody else right now.
yep.
Yeah, you set aside your personal stuff and you go, like they call it, you go into dispatch mode, right? Like, it doesn't matter. I could be so mad at the world, but the moment that call comes in, I'm there for them.
Yes.
So, and then I can be mad about it later, right? So, and that's the thing, like, dispatchers do that. They
compartmentalize.
Thank you.
I'm good at that.
So much, and then they lack in taking care of themselves too. So it's like you are there. It's immediate. I am the dispatcher that is there for you. Like, obviously these girls didn't find that in that person, and maybe that person was facing burnout. Maybe that person was facing compassion fatigue.
Maybe they just need new training.
Maybe they just weren't trained correctly, and they needed, or they're brand new and they're frustrated, and because the training, God knows, training processes for dispatch centers are not perfect. So, whatever it was behind that, like, it is extremely unfortunate that those girls met that one.
Yes.
When there are so many out there that do their job well and want to be that person that helps them. And I'm sure behind the scenes she felt bad. I'm sure that I'm hoping that there's some compassion in it. But yeah, like, that's not that. I mean,
my hope is that she either got a new job or she got some more training and learned from it.
Yeah.
Because that's a frustrating call to listen to, just coming from that perspective, knowing that if I got that call, I would be stressed out trying to get them the help that they needed.
Yeah.
Like staging medics, sending cops,
doing everything you can.
SWAT, right?
Yeah.
So, because that's concerning.
I just thought it would be good to talk about, because I think too, a lot of people, like, the whole world doesn't understand what first responders do all the time, and we kind of do. And this call, I just think it never should have happened. I'm glad that officer came and killed that guy to save them. If there had been another way to save them, I'm sure he would have done it.
Yeah.
But he literally saved her life. She had like seconds probably to live, and she was taken to the hospital in critical care, and now they have to live with that for the rest of their lives.
And that's one of a big takeaway for me too, right? Is there's no correcting their first experience with 911 now.
No.
Now they know, because they've lived it. They called 911 and they barely, because the officer was already in the area, barely got the help they needed.
They barely survived.
Well,
that trust is gone.
Yep. Yeah. When they say that a 911 dispatcher is the first responder, you are the first contact that somebody has with any emergency response. So for you to walk into that room and think, like, for you to walk in that dispatch center and think at all that it's going to be a routine, normal day, you need to get those words out of your head. It's not. It's never going to be that. It is pure chaos all the freaking time. Period. Yeah, you might have your days where you're like, cool, this is a pretty chill day. No, something's coming around the corner and you better be prepared for it.
Expect the unexpected every day.
Like, it's mind-boggling, and you can hear it, like, in her voice. Hello,
Yes.
hello, like,
Yeah.
oh, these are it's just another DV, right? Because you hear it all the freaking time. No, it's not just another DV. You don't, and especially for people out there who are a domestic violence victim, it is not just another DV. You never know when that person finally loses it, if that's going to be the moment or if it's not the moment.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, you cannot, when people call in like that, you can't, they're in a very dangerous situation, and it is a high risk situation, whether that guy is verbal at that moment, or girl, guy or girl, whoever is verbal at that moment, or they're physical, or they're threatening, or it's a phone call. That phone call can lead to a person showing up, to a person having a firearm, to that person not making it through the day.
Yeah.
So to be like that nonchalant about it, especially when you hear that kind of background, like there's asking for help, she's saying, what do you want? There's clear fear, there's shuffling, obviously physical.
Obviously physical. Yeah.
Those are all the indications as to, like, whether you have to ask specific questions or not, those are all indications as to a call should be put in now.
Yeah. And I think that's an important takeaway as well, is the fact that, like, not everybody that listens to it might be able to tell. Most people probably can, but definitely as seasoned dispatchers, you can hear the nonchalance and the lack of care in her voice. Just by her saying hello, you can tell it's not there.
The lack of compassion, or like the urgency, the lack of urgency in it too. Like, it's like, oh, like our area, we're smaller. So yeah, like domestic violence is it's prevalent, but I could imagine like Detroit or New York or LA, these bigger cities, that it would be a constant call. So yeah, like I can see how it would be, oh, here we go again kind of feeling. But you don't, as an you don't have the luxury. Like, it's not even the luxury. You don't have the choice to be like that. You need to walk in there and understand, like, it's literally in the name. It's an emergency response. You are 911. So when people call you, you are going to get a domestic violence. You are going to get assaults, robberies, homicides, medicals, everything. It doesn't matter what comes over on that line. In that moment, when you pick up the phone, you better be there. And if you're not, you need to rethink what you're doing.
And one of the things I always impressed upon any trainees that I had while being a dispatcher is, it may be your 50th call of the day, but for the most part, that's their first time calling 911 today. So it doesn't matter how many times you've heard people arguing, how many times you've had to deal with an intoxicated person yelling to you on the phone. It doesn't matter what the 49 calls you just took were like. This person's calling you for the first time. You need to respond to them equally appropriately.
Well, and it could even be like a barking dog. Or there's one lady that I spoke with who called in a dog locked in a vehicle, and it was her first experience with 911. She doesn't know. People don't know who to call.
It's
like
true.
For a dog locked in a vehicle, they see stuff on the internet all the time of police going out there and doing that stuff. So for you to be nonchalant and kind of rude about how you're going to send it out, and not like saying like anything, but that's the takeaway this lady got from it. She was kind of pushed off. People weren't very nice. Like that was frustrating, because we're all guilty of it, right? Like, you can't say that, like, we're all guilty of getting a little short with somebody and being like, you know what, I have more important things to do. No, you don't have more important things to do. You're handling this. So just help them get the help that they need. And yeah, like, how would you feel if you did find out that it was an overheated dog that did die? You'd feel really bad. It's a dog. Everybody loves dogs.
More than people.
So, I mean, that would suck. That would feel bad. And then there's the owner, and then there's the people who tried to help. Like, it all comes down to emergency. You have like the family member who wants help, or the person who needs help, and you're trying to help them. And like, you feel terrible when somebody does pass away, or like, we've all been there. We live in a large county. You've done CPR for 45 minutes knowing probably this person's not going to make it, but for the sake of helping them and giving peace of mind to the person on scene with them, you're doing CPR. So it's a hard job. So yeah, like, being a police officer is hard, being a medic is hard, but being a dispatcher is hard too. So
On
and
that
then
note,
there's
I'm sure a lot of places are hiring, so see your local.
yeah, so talk to your local.
Oh, geez, we just talked about burnout and all that stuff. They don't sound great.
It's
great.
it's amazing.
We all don't do it anymore, but don't it sound great?
Hey, I sometimes do.
Sometimes I've thought about it. I mean, I
I think-
need wedding money, so
I'm just saying
I think there's a lot that needs to be changed.
about dispatchers in general.
Yeah, I think not only the national standards alone, right, of like how an emergency needs to be handled and how 911 call needs to be handled, but bringing to light the true fact of the mental health of it all, of the fact that nobody, like you said, nobody should be doing this for a long time. Nobody should do it for 10 years.
And if they are, you should be seeing somebody.
Yeah, because it's what you're going through is not quote unquote normal.
Mm-mm.
well, no,
And nobody's built to handle that.
you're not. No, I don't. There are people in our center that we come from that have been doing it way longer than I have, but it's like you can just see the fatigue from the years that it creates, and it is not a healthy environment to have a family in. It's not a healthy environment for you personally. Like, you can't, if you think that you can handle it on your own and you can do that job and you're mentally tough, then you that's like going out on the road and not being scared.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's okay to have a healthy fear. It's an okay thing to know that working in a center like that, you're gonna need help. You're gonna need help physically because you're sitting down for 12 hours a day and you're eating junk because you don't have time to cook because you're so tired when you go home. It's going to be mentally because you're dealing with crap that a normal person doesn't deal with on a regular basis. And it's going to be like that emotional, like, you don't know how to process all that. It may not be your emergency, it may not be your feelings, but somebody just died, or somebody just got shot. Like, you don't know how to emotionally handle that. So you take your anger out on your coworker, you take your anger out on your officers, like,
Or your spouse.
Or
your spouse.
Yeah.
And you have, like, you can create a hostile work environment, you can create a hostile home life just because you don't know how to emotionally respond.
Well, you have to
to
take
the
care of yourself, like
emergency.
everyone always says. You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of other people.
Yeah.
So-
And I think that's across the board for emergency response.
Should we talk about something happy to end the day?
I'm just happy that
Sorry.
that these girls did get the help that they needed, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really cool that they're doing something positive with their
Yes,
experience.
absolutely.
That they started a, what's it called, BIA.
Yeah, I
BIA
couldn't
movement?
figure out
BIA movement.
BIA movement. I need to figure out what it stands for. First, she started like Fight Like a Girl or something, but basically, it's to help girls fight back in that.
Well, that
Which is
awareness to
incredible.
be
Yeah.
that self-defense, right? Because it is big for a woman to understand how to, like, to know, like, if you do go in a situation, don't go to the second spot because the second spot is not good, or how to fight off somebody like that, or you know what I mean? Like, to be aware of your surroundings, to carry, like, I carry mace with me when I'm alone, or when I'm out hiking with the dogs, like, I usually carry a firearm with me. So it's like, and if that's something you're comfortable with and you want to learn how to do it, to seek that out and go learn how to carry a firearm. But
Do what makes you feel safe.
Yeah.
right, and to know how to
Have that will.
Yeah.
how to truly be aware, right? Like, or if you are a single mom, you are aware of, like, what you're putting out there, and how, like, my brother is a single dad. He puts stuff out there about his daughter sometimes where I have to call him and say, like, hey, that's probably not smart. And he'll be like, oh, you're right. Because yeah, you might be a single dad and you could be a victim
Target,
too. You
yeah.
could be a target. So people see that. They see those homes where there's not two parents.
Well, they look for any kind of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I just think it's really cool that these girls have taken it upon themselves to make it a positive, instead of dwelling on the fact that, like, they were let down by 911, and they were
And they're super thankful to the police officer. I don't
Yeah.
know how they feel about the dispatchers, but
Yeah.
you know, it's a
so,
good thing that they did that. I think so too. And that they survived, because that's insane.
that's
Yeah.
and it's cool that they're outspoken about it. So
Yeah.
it's got to
absolutely.
be extremely hard for them to talk about
Relive that.
and relive it. So for them to do multiple interviews and like allow their story to go out, that's huge.
And hope that there's a change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you, girls.
Good for you.
And I'm
Proud of
sorry.
you. I'm sorry.
All I could think of is good for you, you look happy. Thank you for listening. Additional information for each case can be found on our website, truthliesandalibis.buzzsprout.com. New episodes will be uploaded every Monday. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at Truth Lies and Alibis.